Good morning. We're going to open up today a little bit differently. I think variety is the spice of life. We can get so stayed and stuck in our forms that we miss the essence of things. That's our problem. We tend to concretize everything. And then we cling to our concretized forms and we miss the very essence or reality of what's unfolding. Today, we're going to start with a special song. It's a Jewish song. And I'm sorry, I don't speak Hebrew, but it's from, so you can feel free to correct me if I say this wrong. It comes from the Jewish morality laws, or the laws of virtue from the Pirkei vote, Pirkei vote. If we have any Jewish people here, Pirkei vote. And the text translated means the world is sustained by three things: by truth, by justice, and by peace. The world is sustained by three things: by truth, by justice, and by peace.
Shalom.
Glad. Wasn't it beautiful? Um, so I hope we got a good recording of that because I wanted to send it to a couple of old Sangha members who were with us for, I guess, maybe 12 years. And and I got a text from them the other day. Um, hadn't seen them for about 4 years since since COVID started. And then when Panyadeepa was in the last stages of his life, they came to see him. And one of them did not come in because she still has not been around anybody since COVID started. But she came and she just sat in the yard. I mean, it's such devotion and love and appreciation. and and her husband told me, said, this is the first time she's been outside of the house, but she wanted to come and pay respects. Oh, I'm sorry, please, can you get him a chair? No, we get you a chair. Maybe there's one from outside, so that you have one. You got one? Okay, good. Thanks. And so she just sat outside for about 45 minutes in the yard. And I got an email from her that this is a couple, they're Qigong masters, they're health gurus, they have a show where they're teaching about healthy eating and so forth. So they've taken very, very, very extraordinary good care of themselves, and he was able to retire early because he created something, an invention of something, and he sold a gabillion of them. And so I think they retired in their 40s. And so they just lived a really, really good life. And they sent an email that he has cancer. And they're very, very private people. And whenever they encounter an obstacle, they just handle their business, So when I got the text, I knew that it was really a difficult time for them. And they asked for my wisdom in helping them go through this difficult period. He's up in age and he had already had several procedures and a surgery, and has 2 more surgeries. And what I have learned is that sometimes these surgeries are more difficult than what they're designed to take care of on the body, and all the complications that come from them. And so I was just thinking about what wisdom I could share with them. And I remembered that Panyadeepa asked me, he said, how is it possible that I could have taken such good care of my body all of these years to come to this where I can't control my body? He said, I'm just really befuddled by this. And I didn't really have an answer for him. And he didn't talk much after that. And for him to even express that was a lot, if you know Panyadeepa. And I felt the one time, maybe just the one time, that he asked me for a little bit of wisdom, because he was the wise one, right? Just the one time I didn't have some fantastic thing to share with him that could lift him at that moment. You know, he didn't really need me to teach him or share any Dharma. I mean, what could I share with him? But at that moment, he came and I didn't have, you know, when you like just having conversations, like how we sit around and have conversations, conversation is a conversation. It doesn't mean that much other than it tickles our intellectual fantasies. And, but at that moment when you're hanging on a word as inspiration, as a breath of life, you know, that's a different thing. And I didn't have anything for him. Then after he died, when I was pondering this and pondering his questions, you know, then an answer came to me. But too late, I guess he found his own answer, or he didn't, you know. So we have to think about that. At these times when it's not just conversation, when it's not just discussion, when it's not just I think you this, or I think that, or I feel this, or I feel that, when it is actually somebody's hanging on it, literally like they're hanging on to their last breath. What do you really hold to be true for you at that time? You know, that's where the rubber meets the road and where one really has to know where one stands. I remember like a month later, had gotten to a point, and maybe, I don't know, but so not desperately, but so intently evaluating what I hold to be true. I entered a state that was so sublime that provided a continuum of life for me that I could experience in the here and now, that absolutely took the fear of dying away. And I'm going to tell you, each one of us will come to that stage sooner or later. The thing is, we don't even know when, but we will. So we shouldn't take this as some exercise to fill the day or to make us feel a little happier in this moment, although we can use it for that. But we need to answer or be able to answer for ourselves the fundamental question of who am I and what awaits me after death. And all the other little losses that we have throughout life, you know, are just little bits of that. Mine is probably going to hand up. These are just little snippets of that one great question. And so in everything we do and in everything we say, day by day, minute by minute, you know, in everything that we evaluate and how we evaluate the course of our life, we should be seeking an answer to that fundamental question. Because it's the only thing that breaks the notion of a separation from who or what we call ourselves. It's the only thing that creates a continuum of no dying. And when there's a continuum of no dying, one understands the precursor of no birth. It's not something that you can just articulate and somebody understands it. But as the Buddhist said, it was something that you can experience and one really knows it. And that's what gives us the assurance that we can bypass that which the ordinary mind can't understand. And we have a deep peace that passes all understanding. Now, if one has not had such a realization, then they are conditioned to be influenced by their eye consciousness, their ear consciousness, what they feel. They are conditioned to be influenced by that. And one's influence becomes one's personal experience. So it's impossible, although we might try to comfort another with the comfort that we ourselves have, it's impossible to comfort, truly comfort another. So we better have our own mechanism and our own understanding for comfort. Without it, it just becomes so much talk from the outside. But it can't soothe and put out that fire of fear and of loss that's actually in the heart. Only by oneself can one put out that flame. And so this practice is about helping us to establish ourselves upon a certain realization that can hold us or allow us to hold ourselves in every situation of life. And we already know that it's constantly changing from moment to moment. And it's okay if we laugh one moment and we cry the next moment, because that's all shifting. It's impermanent. It's just the thoughts that come and go, the feelings that come and go. So we don't have to even try to get rid of them. We can just have them knowing that they're impermanent, and they come, they stay for a while, that feeling, that emotion, and it passes. It's impermanent too. So don't try so hard to snuff that out. Just let it arise, be there, and pass. And we can always be with someone. So laugh when people are laughing, and we can hold the sorrow when people are in sorrow. But know that we can't do much more because we are on the outside of their experience. And know that when we express anything to them, that we're only doing it from our experience. So here's where having an experience can be helpful and can be useful. Because we talk about transmission and what transmission is. And it's really nothing more than using words that are not really that helpful, because words are just words, but allowing them or carrying them across or sharing them within the vessel of a certain experience. And what transfers more is not so much the words that we say. We can have all the right words, or we can even have all of the wrong words. But it's the vehicle in which they transfer. And that vehicle is born of our direct experience. So sometimes if somebody's asking me for something and I don't have an experience of that, then I'll just say, can't advise you on that. Because they would just be words somebody gave to me, and then I give them to you. But when one has a certain experience, and that experience might be looked at through the lens of instructions from those we consider wise, they might benefit us in a certain way so that we look at and hold that experience in a certain way. And if it has lifted us, then we can share that. And we can speak those words with some strength and some confidence, and we give life to them. Therefore, the words that we speak to others only carry in them the life that we have. So whether you're sharing something good or something not so good, or with the utmost intention, good intention, or not good intention, what transfers to them is what's in you the most. And that's why we have to be very careful about what we say to people. Even more careful what we say than how we say it. Sometimes we can just say something and it wasn't like the most skillful way to say it, but it was a true thing. Then the weight of that speaking, leans towards the good side. So then comes the other part, the hearing of it, the receiving of what was said. And how one receives something, whether they receive it with gratitude or with humility or with curiosity to know whether that could possibly be true or not. How we receive a thing is the other side of the mutual exchange. And so someone can be sending something with a great heart, and we can recognize that, and yet we don't have to take it in. We can just receive the appreciation that it was offered because someone really cared. You know how people like to give you advice. Yeah. And you don't have to like just cut off and stop all the advice. You can just let it go like that. You can go in one end, go out the other. You don't have to say, why did you say that to me? Or don't say that to me. You can let it find no part in you. And it's done. No further controversy, no further need for discussion. One can hear something, one can decide whether that benefits them or not, and then they can either keep it or they can let it go. No need to say anything else. Or one can take something in, and if they're confused by it, because now they've heard two contrary things, they're confused by it. One can make a deep inquiry into oneself about whether this has meaning, whether it has meaning for me right now. Sometimes something has meaning, but it's premature to take it in. Sometimes something can come in and it's like after the fact, and like, oh, I wish I knew that before, but I got it now. No, and I'll save it for, I'll just put that into my memory banks. And maybe we got something and it's useful in some instances, and then it's not useful in other instances. We alone decide for ourselves what's beneficial and what's not, what's useful and what's not. And useful doesn't necessarily mean feel good. And so we have to be able to separate between just wanting what makes us feel good and what could actually be useful to uproot some of ourselves. So all this goes into just having a general conversation with one another. When we talk about, the Buddha talks about animal talk, and he talks about Dharma talk, and how to evaluate Dharma talk. And he speaks of animal talk, you know, like, you want to see a picture of my grandbaby? She's so beautiful. As soon as you see somebody, all of the things that cause us to grasp around, and that's probably very true, extremely beautiful. But that feeds our grasping, and that's why suffering is born from those who are dear. And he tries to give us a way of holding life that's a little bit more balanced, so that when we have to deal with the vicissitudes of life, that we can. And if we fail to do it sufficiently before catastrophe came upon us, when it comes, then we know we have a refuge. So I'm saying this because the taking in of Dharma it's a serious matter. And it's so little of it that we have in our lives. I mean, if you just look at your own 24-hour period and how you spend that, and how much of it is really spent with an eye towards understanding the true nature of reality, it's minuscule. It's very little bit. So when one has a Dharma friend, you know, it's an extraordinary thing to have a Dharma friend. It's an extraordinary thing to have a Dharma friend who can tell you the truth, because even though it might be hard to bear, it can get you over the hump. So that's what I think about the Dharma these days. What a precious, precious gift it is. As harsh as it may seem or feel sometimes, but it's certainly not as harsh as the tricks of ignorance and delusion that we are steeped in, that bring us so much suffering. And one might say, well, I'm not suffering. That's because you didn't get the bad news yet. But when the bad news comes, because of our grasping, because of our clinging, because of our craving, then we will feel the pain of same self. You know, I have diabetes, and so I didn't feel like taking care of it earlier in my life. I didn't want to stop. I didn't want to change habits that I had. I didn't want to give up things that I liked. Tell you the truth, I was going to say I still haven't given them up. But I have cut back. And maybe I can't say it's that I've worked so hard to cut back. It's just like the appetite left. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes when you start feeling so bad, the things that you like that contribute to feeling so bad, like I mean, like you just don't like them as much, you know, because you really like feel so bad now, and you just want to feel better. That suddenly that doesn't look that enticing. That doesn't look that delicious. That is like, and usually that's how we learn, or some people who are like me, that I have to get to a place that this becomes more meaningful for me than that. It's never been that way so much around spiritual matters, because that's just how I came into this world. It's not anything that I actually did. It was just the fruit of the karma that had an appearance as Panjawadi. And so I can't say, oh, I've been spiritual since my birth, like, because I'm just so magnificent. But it's not that. It's that I am the fruit, the flowering of a previous, we say incarnation, but that's a different being who planted a seed, and I am the fruit of that. So what I entered this world with the kind of mindset that I had as a child, Paniwadi didn't generate that. Paniwadi is just the expression of that. So if we could each look at ourselves and recognize that we are the expression of something, we won't feel so disturbed with whatever state we find ourselves in. Of course, we can always try to leave a little better planting for the next being that emerges, right? We could, and if you look at it this way, it gives a purpose to your life. It helps make life meaningful, because one doesn't take all the credit for their growth, nor do they take all the blame, you know, for where they are insufficient. And that's how we can avoid having these feelings that we have about ourselves. Self-loathing, the feeling of not being enough, too weak to overcome things. And we start blaming ourselves, having these feelings of insecurity. So the Buddha tries to give us a more expansive way of understanding things. It's like you didn't like not exist and then suddenly you did. There had to be a cause that produced the condition of you. So when people tell me that they can't wrap their head around the notion of rebirth linking, you know, some call it rebirth linking, some call it reincarnation, but you know, when they tell me, they just think like suddenly they were created through no cause but a sperm and an egg. That's as far as their thinking can go. That just does not make sense to me. What came before that? What came before that? What came before that? And the Buddha says, you could say that you have existed since beginningless time through these other forms. And now there is the current appearance and expression. And there's a finite period for that expression, because everything that is born dies. Now, when Deepa asked that question, it wasn't the time to start giving him a Dharma talk on, you know, impermanence and old age, sickness, and death. That wasn't the time for those kinds of words, because he already knows the schlick about old age, sickness, and death. But it was to recognize that he was approaching a time in his life and approaching a place that nobody else could enter with him. That he had to go alone from this point, and he had to know his own truth. And was what he knew and what he embraced enough to ferry him across at this time? So he wasn't really asking me a question, mostly because I wasn't the one dying. He wasn't asking me a question. He was just talking. He was asking himself the question, and I was just a witness to it. So it's important to know when we are being a witness to a question, a fundamental question for a person, and when they're really asking us the question. And that's what came to me after he died. We have to know how to hear. Because I had some guilt around why I couldn't answer the question. I'm like, maybe he's too weak in mind now to answer this question. But you know what you know. And sometimes you get to that space where you have to handle something alone, and you start talking out loud. And that's what I wanted to say to you. Life is a real thing. If I were to ask you, what is life to you? Would you have an answer? Pondering his question, which was just about his body, right? But he recognized that the body was going into a certain state of decay from which it would not recover. So what's left? He knew he couldn't stop it. So then what? So I kept pondering the question. And it took me to a question for myself. And that question is, what is life? What is life to you, Panya? And I'd like to ask you that same question. What is life? Now, we can have some scientific, I guess, explanations and definitions of what life is. But it's more than all of those things. And I asked myself that question again and again and again. And I came up with my answer about what is life. And I had two thoughts that came and rested in me. And for me, life is to live each moment without fear and to die without regret. And everything else is an expression of these two things. To live each moment without fear. To die without regret. And it has become, since the true answer was given to me, for Panawati, how to live. But you need to have your own, is what I'm saying. Living without fear means that no matter what vicissitudes come my way, I am sure that I can handle it. There's nothing that comes up in my life that will not be handleable. So when a challenge comes into my life, if it has presented itself, it's there. It's only as much of a challenge as what? As I make it. How powerful that is. Seems like a little thing, a little blah, blah to say. But suppose with everything you heard or every situation that presented itself, when it arose in your life, from your heart of hearts, you could say, oh, I can handle that. Handling that might mean fixing it. It might mean ignoring it. It might mean letting it go. It might mean enduring it. It doesn't mean that you're going to always have an outcome according to what the world calls happiness. The true happiness is to be able to handle that challenge when it arises without fear. And that's power. So when something starts to come up, that first little feeling that makes us anxious, that first little feeling that brings us a bit of a twinge of impending doom or sorrow or whatever, where is my refuge at that moment? It is in knowing that I have the innate capacity to be with every single thing that arises in my life. And I remind myself, if the fear starts to come, that that's something I'm manufacturing in my mind, that I am building. So if I build it, who can destroy it? Who can tear it down? Only the builder. Only the builder. I remember that there was this woman that was after my husband, one of my husbands. And I was worried about it. I mean, 'cause she was fine. I mean, shapely, she was beautiful, she had a great personality. I ain't have any of these things, right? You know, I had a good mind and he liked good mind, but she had everything else that I knew he liked. I mean, she liked to dress up, she liked to put on makeup. He would always say, Diane, can't you put some makeup on? You know, and he wasn't saying that I was ugly. He just liked to have, what you call it? Eye candy, right, yeah. He liked to have eye candy. Like I wasn't interested in that stuff. I mean, the first time I saw her without makeup, I didn't even recognize her. She could paint, she painted her face every day, but it was a beautiful face that she painted. But the day I saw her without makeup, honestly, I didn't know who she was. That's not a lie. That is really, really the truth. That was before I learned about Hollywood makeup. You know how on the movies, how they, and it doesn't, they kiss and it doesn't even rub off because they paint the lipstick on. Well, now everybody buys that kind of lipstick, the two-step lipstick, so that when you kiss, it doesn't rub off. But at that time, only movie stars had things like that. But she had found the secret, and she would like paint herself. She was so beautiful. The shape, she really did that. That was how she handled herself. And she liked to dress up like I didn't. And um, and so she was always around, and she was pretty smart too. Oh, at least she knew how to get a man. She was pretty smart in that way. And I was perturbed. It was the only time in my life with him that I thought maybe I would lose. I would lose him. All the rest I gave away. I didn't want. But him, I wanted. You know. And I started reading my Bible because I like, God, you're gonna have to save me because I'm getting ready to kill somebody and really go to hell. And I need help. And I opened up and I started reading from the book of Proverbs. And it said, a wise woman establishes her house. A foolish one tears it down. That's all it said. A wise woman establishes her house. A foolish one tears it down. Now, I had started acting out a little bit, like because we were in business together. So was a relationship we had to have, you know. And I started acting a little bitchy and stuff like that, you know, and that's not good for business. But that was my insecurities coming out, and my acknowledgement that she was present. But when I read that scripture, I said, how do I apply that to me? Not just some words on a paper. A wise woman establishes her household, a foolish one tears it down. I said that, how do I take that from that? How do I apply that right here? And I sat with that. And I meditated on those words. And it came to me that however I carried myself in it would be the way that it went. And I changed how I related to that whole situation. And it changed the outcome of that whole situation. Because it helped me abandon my fear and the resultant actions of that fear. I began to relate to her differently, not as if she was a threat. And she ceased to be a threat. I began to relate to his relationship with her differently. And I began, as soon as I made up in my mind that that was my reality, all of the fear just emptied out. I remembered who I was, that I was an equally good find, maybe even a better one. You know, I just changed how I saw myself in it, is what I'm saying. And when I changed, everything changed. Now, that's the way it turned out. It didn't have to have turned out that way, but from that experience, I learned how to work with other challenges in my life in that same way. Even when I saw something coming that I knew, ooh, this is going to hurt, I didn't deny it was coming. You know, didn't try to push it away. I could accept even when something's coming that I can't change, that I can't fix. I can learn to accept and allow it to be here because it's already arisen. And from that, I began to learn that what arises is also temporary. It won't stay forever. It also is going to pass. So I can begin to build up my discipline and my power to my sustaining power, my ability to go through something. You know, some people who can't go through nothing. Everything is a drama. Can't go through anything. It's like trying to bite down on a cracked tooth. You know, hurts so bad. And nobody can help us with that. We have to do it ourselves. And so this is a way of maturing, to be able to truly enjoy life. It doesn't mean that everything is going to be rosy or happy for us. Actually, in the end, I mean, if you looked in the back of the book, it's not a happy ending, you know. It's like everything that we like, we become separated from. Everyone that we like dies or we die, you know. So you got like, it ain't no happy ending at the end of this story. So how does one go through life being able to not just endure the vicissitudes of life, but how do we create a marvelous existence for ourselves that allows us to just hold what happens day by day, hour by hour, minute by minute? This exists. And it is the continual uprooting of a mind of fear and doing everything we can in the moment that we'll have no regret. No woulda, shoulda, wish I could have done this, wish I had been better, wish I had none of that. That is life. So life then, the word life, the experience of life, can be synonymous with freedom. The word freedom. The experience of freedom. Or with the word liberation, the experience of liberation. Or even the word awakening, awakening to the truth that I and I alone create my reality. That the word enlightenment, to lighten, to lift up, and to exalt in a certain way, that gives me a continual ease and freedom to explore, to try new things, to taste, touch, and to handle without trepidation. To bring into this moment something of the Buddha. I'm still unpacking the word vidya, what a vidya really means. The Buddha master said that if we are to have a capacity to bring forth the vidyas in life, and looked up the word vidya, And in Chinese, it means brightnesses. And so on down the road, some scholars put a definition on vidya and was saying like you have like inner logic, that's a vidya, healing, that's a vidya, and so they named 5 vidyas. Buddha said that's not right. A vidya is the individual brightness and spark that you bring to the world. That's a vidya. And it has, I watched the show this morning on how baby carrots came to be. Did anybody see that show? And that baby carrots aren't baby carrots. They represent the 35 or 40% of the ugly carrots that can't be marketed, because they are bent or, they're not in the right shape. And so carrot growers lose 35, 40% of their crop because the stores won't buy a carrot that's not like perfect in appearance. And so a farmer came up with the idea that he would make these little teeny baby carrots by, instead of that just being waste, that each carrot could produce maybe 4 little baby carrots if they were cut and skinned and put in a package. So he tried that. Well, people they weren't interested in the little carrots as like cooked, but he found that they were so small that people liked them raw. And so now we have the baby carrot industry, and I didn't know they weren't baby carrots. That's number one. But number two, he took something that was causing him to lose 40% of his crop, and turned it around into something that was useful and got more people to eat raw. And that's supposed to be good for you. And so that's a vidya. That's a vidya. So first of all, we know that vidyas are not necessarily confined to holy people, right? That's good because I'm not holy. Trying to be, but I'm not that holy. But then maybe there is something that I offer. He did it. And so I watched about 4 or 5 of these different people and how they came up with things simply maybe out of necessity. From the little micro sprouts. I don't know, I was watching food shows since I don't cook, don't even like that kind of stuff. But what it showed me is how each one of us has something that we offer to the world. And that it should give us a certain kind of joy to offer that to the world. And it gives us a sense of I just feel really grateful today for all of the inventions and the things that people offer to us out of their heart. Now, sometimes maybe it was because they needed a financial solution to something. That's okay. That's an energy that we use for exchange. So it's nothing wrong with making $1 million off of your invention. But even if it wasn't a price tag put on it, even if it was just something that gave a dying friend hope, it's just a word that they could hold in their hand. Maureen, she bought a little unicorn upon your deeper. It was about this size when she came to see him. And she said, you know, when people are dying, they like to have something that they can grasp. Mhm. That's why their hands curl like that. And she put the little unicorn in his hand. If you could imagine Panyadika holding this little pink and white unicorn. But it was the most beautiful thing to me because the way he held it, and he had it in his hand for like about a week or so before he died. He never let that unicorn go. And I thought it was the most beautiful thing. And when she first pulled it out, my Paniwadi mentality started in. Like, here come this woo-woo woman with this, you know, like that's when my mind went. But when she said, Panyadeep, I brought you a gift, he said, okay. And that's him. He said, yeah. He said, okay. She said, I brought you this to hold in your hand. And he grabbed it and he never let it go. Mm. So that's how we have to think about these teachings. The only purpose they serve is to give us life. So I wanted to pass out to each one of you today. If somebody can, if you all can help me really quickly. You know, within the Chinese Buddhism experience and don't read them yet. I want you to keep listening to me, okay? With the Chinese Buddhist experience and the Tibetan Buddhist experience, they've had, you know, a couple of thousand years to unpack things. We haven't had that much time. And true to Shakyamuni Buddha, who is a historical figure, that meaning that he lived as a human being on this planet. And when he was asked, is there any more like you? He said, y'all, yeah, like right now. He talked about 2,000 because he said I had 500 male, 500 female monastic, 500 lay male disciples, and 500 female lay disciples. Right now, Vajragata asked him, was there anybody else who was awakened like him? He said, yeah. So Vajragata said, good, then I'll join your community. But I wasn't if it was just you. It's only the opportunity for you to reach this. I mean, like, why join? That's like when the Jehovah's Witnesses came and knocked my door and they telling me 144,000 gonna be saved. And I'm like, it's more than 144,000 of y'all. So why should I join, why should I join your group? Ain't no room for me, you know. And so down through the years, they have in Tibetan what they call the tuku, which is reincarnated, you know, Lama, holy being, great enlightenment. They have, so we call them from our tradition, patriarchs, you know, and we say, well, we see their human side, but never had a chance to experience like their disciples did, that I'll use the word divine just to create a distinction. Their divine side. The divine side being that part that we call the Dharma body, the Dharmakaya, the Dharma body, not the human body, but the Dharma body. That which answered the question of living and dying, so that they perceived a kind of continuum that was never born and never died. So death then for them was so much like flipping off a jacket. And they developed the capacity to lead others who were really interested in discovering that for themselves. That's not everybody. And some want it, but only if it comes in the flavor they like. So we pick and choose. But in order for that part that was empty or void of what the six consciousnesses can pick up, that's what we can pick up through what we see and hear and taste and touch and smell and think. In order for that part, which is apart from all of those mental persuasions or mental ways of knowing, they needed to create a bridge. And that bridge would be Sambhogakaya, or bliss body, that could reverberate and produce the energy or the mechanism by which there could be a physical expression in the Mahakai. So we all know that there's a part of us that everybody sees and that we all interact with, right? You say, oh, I know her. But do I really know her? Do I know her like she knows her? No, I don't. So we all know that there is a part of us, an aspect of us, that no matter who knows us, they can't know us to that degree. Like one woman said to me, like, I know your husband, like, you don't know him like I know him. But then I don't know him like he actually is. So there's degrees, right, of knowing, of penetration into what's really real. And so when this wisdom is apprehended, it can't be thought up. We can't like make it up in our minds, because our mind can only create a picture of something based on these external contacts. That's why you can't use mind to awaken. So then why do they deal so much and talk so much about the mind? Because it starts with how to focus and turn one's mind away from all of the distracting manifestations we have until one's mind can become centered and still. And when it gets still enough, then all of the illusory experiences we have fall away. And then one sees reality as it is. And that's just so much talk. The only thing you can do is get still, get centered, and hold that space until the contrived realities fall apart. That's all I can tell you. In 10,000 ways, that's all we can tell you. It's something that cannot be articulated, but it can be directly know. And so when a being reaches this stage, because of that direct knowing, he can drop breadcrumbs. He could say, do this, try that, think about it this way. Just sit with it until, like all of your thinking stops. And be there in the moment with this reality, and you'll see things. You'll understand things, you'll realize things that you never have before. That takes you out of your anxiety, out of your fear, out of your torment. And you'll discover this marvelous thing that we call life. Hard to describe, but yet we know we have it. And so when Parvasambhava encountered this experience, he began to teach. They called him a Tuku, and in Chinese, they called him living Buddha. That means living being who is awake. Now, there's many different degrees of awakening. There's many different degrees of liberation. There's differing degrees of enlightenment. All of you in this room have some degree of awakening. Because it's when you realize the truth of some things and the resultant capacity that comes with realizing that truth. And I'm closing. Because when you realize it, you're able to walk in more freedom. You're able to walk in more joy. And it's not the jumping up and down kind of joy, but it's the kind of ease that allows you to be with what life brings in the course of a day. It allows you to be with the ease of knowing that you can either come up with a solution or you can ride something out. It's the kind of knowing that there's nothing that this world brings that you can't accommodate. If it's here, it's already here. It helps us to recognize that we don't need the things that we thought we needed to be happy. That we can find this contentment in life, whether we have a little or whether we have a lot. It allows us to have a confidence, not the boasting kind when you're trying to rouse confidence, but the easy kind that you don't fear any man. And it allows you to make a contribution to the world without really trying. Without really trying. That it's a natural part of you to give back to the world that gives you so much. A kind of gratitude that arises within you. And when one can inspire you in that way, he is worthy of your gratitude and worthy of your respect. If we don't know enough, sometimes we're fearful around the little bit we do know. It brings up all these questions and all these reservations and all these hesitations because of what's in a word. So I proclaim to all of you that I've met a living Buddha. And if that bothers you, that has nothing to do with me. If you encounter one, you'll know. Because you'll know by the life-giving properties that manifest in you. And if that does happen, if you're the one who doesn't know, you can't speak to the one who does about it. You can just think they're off, they're crazy, or they're lucky, or can I get in there too? Or whatever. But we shouldn't take our not know and try to influence one who has come to me. Leave them alone, is what I say to you. And maybe look for something yourself. It's a good way to live, and it'll keep you from having troubles. Because we all reap what we sow. Don't destroy somebody else's faith. You can't tear down their good fortune, but you can produce doubt in them that cause them to suffer loss. I wouldn't want to be the one who bears that karma. So I just realized yesterday what was happening here. And it felt too wonderful to be true. And yet I can tell you that it is true. So the disciples who walked in the time that Shakyamuni Buddha was on the earth, they were ignorant just like me, right? And then they heard words that shifted and transformed their whole reality. And they began to tell others to the extent that they could explain. But they certainly reaped the benefit of it. And many others after him. Padmasambhava, Talopa, 3 of the Buddha's chief disciples, right? Ananda, who's the other 2? Not Rahula, that was his son, him too though, but Sariputta and Moggallani, there's Talopa, Milarepa, all of these. And you'd hear the marvelous songs that they would write in praise. The teacher who cracked the shell of their ignorance. And they had to work their way out of it, but it was cracked by their great living awakening, living Buddha. And if it was all in the past, it could not be accessed in the present, what would we be searching for? What? We would all be dead, D-E-A-D. But only because we think it is alive could we possibly taste the fruit of it. Something that's life affirming, something present at all times, operating in the world. At all times, these manifestations appearing. And the great fortune for to now be our time to encounter such a being. So That's what's unfolding right now. That we are the direct disciples of such a being, and trying to unpack and realize the teaching. And yet this is a new thing. See, I was a Pentecostal and a charismatic, and they didn't have those until recently, like the last 50 years. So I was part of a new thing. I'm always a part of a new thing. I like new things. Part of a new thing. What's here, what's now, and the old religious expressions that was like, they would be singing about how he was crucified for us. I'm like, yeah, but he got up. Like, why are we singing all these songs about on the cross? If that was the end of the story, then how is that useful to me? The end of the story, we lose. I mean, like, what is that? But there was something life-giving about that man that carried on down these thousands of years, that still give life to some who understand his message. Many, many, many more who call themselves by his name who don't understand his message, but the ones that actually do. It's life affirming. And in this way, I too met such a life affirming. And so a lot of things, because he just left his body, we don't have 2,000 years of stories, things that we can read about him. They're just coming forward now. So it's a trying, a challenging time. It takes some of us in this first stage to get it compiled, to get it disseminated, to have our experiences, to be able to share them, because it's happening right now. And I was sitting there thinking about all of this and how, when I'm meditating, how I can pose a question and Buddha Master comes and just in my heart and in my mind and gives me an answer about something. And then he'll say something like, you just have to know him, see how he was. He's like, don't take my word for it. Check it out yourself. Or something like that. And I'll start Googling for something. And lo and behold, it ain't new. It's right there. I just didn't know it. And so I sat down and I wrote a prayer. Remember, I gave some of you, not all of you, but some of you, his heart mantra last week. And one should not recite that mantra if they don't have any confidence in its story. You should not recite that mantra. And I didn't write it down, but I just told you, no, because these things are delivered orally, right? And if you missed it and didn't get it, then you weren't supposed to be there to get it. But then I sat and a prayer emerged. And you know how you read the great prayer to Milarepa. I'm right now working with a teacher because I have an affinity for medicine Buddha. And, there's a great prayer for this teacher. And I think he lived in the 800s or something like that, 800 AD. But he had a connection, and they considered him the reincarnation of medicine Buddha. And my doctor is a Tibetan doctor of medicine. So when I go for a doctor's visit with him, it's not just a doctor's visit. He's banging on these copper cans, and he's chanting medicine Buddha mantras, and he's doing something, and he's lighting fire, and he's doing all of this. I mean, like, I like going just for the ceremony, but I am feeling better too. Yeah, but that's really why I go. But but just discovering it. But it's been so wonderful. He said, you had such a remarkable turnaround, and these are the medicines and the ceremonies that they do over with spiritual practitioners, you know. And he said this, and as we start doing this, he said, I would like to introduce you to my teacher. And because I see he has some healing power that manifests in my life, you see. And so I know that he knows something more than ordinary. And if you all had seen me a couple of months ago, you would agree. And it's nothing but taking little black medicines that he makes out of dirt. They taste terrible. And these rituals that he does. And I consider them not rituals. I replaced it with the word technology. These are certain technologies that he uses that ancient, go back 2,000 years. But they're bringing me into something and allowing my body to be able to sustain and access some higher truth that before my body was too dysfunctional to be able to hold. But it's getting stronger now through his medicines and his practices. So I went and I had that introduction. And his master was who they consider an enlightened being from the 400s, I think, who comes and teaches him now in the 2000s. And his doctors learn those technologies and they heal. So anyway, so to close out, a prayer came to me. You notice at the end, they keep us so spooked. I put unauthorized because, I mean, like a prayer is your own prayer, right? So don't get confused because it says unauthorized. I'm just saying unauthorized to make people who feel like they have dibs on Buddha Master, just acknowledging so that they feel comfortable that this was not authorized by any of the holy gurus. But I tell you that it proceeded out of my heart, and as far as I'm concerned, it's authorized. But that's just to make them feel comfortable. And so as some of you have started doing the chant, like we chant Namo Di Sancho Doji Chanpo. And that's to set up a sound, a vibration that makes or allows our mind to vibrate on the frequency of his mind so that what he can understand, we can understand. Like a tuning fork. That's all. Nothing in the man, something in the wisdom. And so this is it. And this only take me 2 minutes to get through. And then you can have it. And if it supports you, you can use it. So Namo Di Sancho Doji Chanpo means I pay homage to you, Doji Chang Buddha III. You whose mind is none other than that of Shakyamuni Buddha, the world-honored one. That's what he would always say. He said, Shakyamuni is the Buddha of this world. Some of his teachings got twisted, and I'm just here to set up right, restore the teachings to their full power and capacity so that you can realize them. Are a repository of living treasure for all beings to delight in. Living in what sense? In the Manakaya form, you came to this world to correct what was upside down. The Manakaya is in our physical body form, right? In an unfortunate century filled with confusion, untold living beings were liberated. Buddha says many awakened disciples and an awakening disciple that I know about. Returning to Sambhogakaya form of great bliss and power. That's when dropping off the human body, the Namanakaya, still maintains the Sambhogakaya or the bliss body that is able to communicate. You teach those with affinity for your voice, and they receive sublime understanding. That means those who find his voice sweet to them, that they can perceive wisdom and understanding. Thus, our hearts are filled with inspiration and deep respect. Through the sound of your Vajra voice, Vajra meaning diamond, like still able to cut through ignorance, and our penetration of meanings, so the sound can cut through ignorance, and if we receive it, we can have understanding. May the single essence of the 84,000 dharmas, which cure worldly, be realized. The 84,000 dharmas are the innumerable ignorances and obscurations that keep living beings in the realms of samsara. So with all sincerity, I prostrate and offer gratitude from the depths of my heart and pray may those whose conditions have not matured, or those or who hear but cannot be taught. So that means those whose conditions have not matured means they don't have the karma to be able to receive the teaching at this time. Or who hear but cannot be taught means who reject. That's a nice way of saying who reject. They don't get nicer. Be compassionately held and guided to such a one as yourself, now or in the future. So maybe they can't hear from him. There is another teacher that they can take delight in and that they can open themselves to hear. That their three karmas, their thoughts, their actions, and their speech may enter yoga and realize the fruit of true liberation. And yoga is when one's thoughts and actions and speech align with the thoughts and actions and speech of the Buddhas. May my eyes never leave their suffering until auspiciousness prevails. And that is our great wish as aspiring bodhisattvas, to never abandon them in their sorrows until the time occurs for them to receive the auspiciousness of the truth body. And so some of us are chanting before we meditate. And is that benefiting? Yeah. So that's where the realization comes in. So they're chanting the mantra and establishing an affinity, just like you talking to somebody through the telephone. And then they go into their own meditation with a higher vibration that allows them to be able to understand things on a deeper level. So that's my offering to you today. It's words on a piece of paper. You can drop it in the trash. But I tell you, if you utilize it, it becomes a technology that puts you more into vibration with the truth of the teachings, that you can crack them open and understand them. So we'd like to close with a song. Why be afraid if I'm not alone? It's never easy, the rest is unknown.
Up to now for me it's been head dug in stone.
Each and every moment,
Searching what to believe in. Coming out of the dark,
we see the light now.
and it's shining on me.
See the light, see the light, see the light coming out of the dark.
Know the love that saved me, sharing with me.
Starting again, it's part of the plan.
I'll be so much stronger holding your hand.
Step by step, I'll make it through.
We're all the way coming out of the dark. I finally see the light, and it's shining on me.
See the light, see the light, see the light coming out of the dark.
Know the love that saved me, sharing with
Ain't nobody stop me, watch me.
stand on the rock. But your love is all it takes.
No matter what we
Coming
face.
out of the dark, we see the light now, and it's shining on me. See the light coming out of the dark. Know the love that saved me, sharing with
Ain't nobody stop me.
stand on the rock of your love. Of your stand on the rock of your
Thank you.